Hello and welcome to Books and Beyond. I'm your host, Jimmy Bennet, and Books and Beyond is the show where we hope to help people personify their aspirations. Before I get to my guest today, I'd like to just give a couple of plugs. One to the Southeastern chapter of the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. We meet at the Groton Public Library every third Monday at 6:30. It's a great group of writers. If you're interested in writing a book or you're an agent, illustrator, come on down, get some inspiration, do a little networking, and meet some fellow authors. And also I'd like to throw in a plug for Toastmasters. That's at the Mills Center at the Aquarium every second and fourth Wednesday of the month from 5 to 6:30. And Toastmasters is a great way to learn how to speak in public. Helps you form better habits for writing speeches and giving speeches or even presentations or even just to talk better in public. It's been a great help to me, and it's a great group of folks, and everybody's very helpful, and it's something worth checking out if you want to do any kind of public speaking. And my last shameless plug is for my new books. I have a new series out called William Gillette and Mystic. Basically, I'm trying to highlight the rich history of Mystic with landmarks, locations, people of that time, all written into a mystery with William Gillette, my character, as the lead actor. This book, The Case of Mayhem and Mystic, is set in 1932, and this is set in Noank in 1922. Both the books, there's a lot of things I think for like national or worldwide, maybe people wouldn't be as interested, but anybody who lives in southeastern Connecticut, I went to Carl C. Cutler Junior High School, and I never knew who Carl C. Cutler was until I started doing some research. So it's pretty interesting. I hope you'll check it out. But now I'd like to get to my guest, Roy Bourque, fellow author and a fellow member of Kappa. Hey, Roy, how you doing?
Good.
Good. So what's going on, Roy? Tell us a little about yourself and what got you going here.
Well, I was born outskirts of Boston, grew up in Massachusetts, spent my last year of high school in Jackman, Maine. It's on the west side of Moosehead Lake near the Canadian border.
Wow.
And from there I went into the service. My books are really about the experiences I've had and how it correlates to what I've learned throughout the world or throughout my life.
Okay.
I was brought to a Victorian-style Catholic church when I was 5. I was mesmerized by the music and the art. Age 6, I had my first communion. Age 7, I started Sunday school. Age 8, I was thoroughly disillusioned because the focus was on sin and the fires of hell. So I had questions, and they didn't like me questioning, but if you tell me that I'm going to burn forever if I don't get it right, I'm going to question.
Right.
And when I was 9, I was getting ready to leave the Sunday school class, and my Sunday school teacher says, "You can't go yet. Mother Superior wants to talk to you." So I was brought to Mother Superior's office. She sat me down and she said, "The questions you're asking can only be answered by God. You need to get alone with God, ask Him the questions, and let Him answer." She says, "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" And I had insights prior to that, but I never took them to the next level, and I said, "I believe so." She says, "Well, all right then," and she sent me on my way. So when I left the church that day, I said, they're not refusing to answer my questions, they don't know how. So a couple of weeks later, I was meditating on God, and I had this mystical experience that the only thing I can equate it to was quantum physics. But I wouldn't know that until 11 years later when I was introduced to quantum physics, and now it's like, wait a minute, I can put these two ideas together. And that's what started the ball rolling. Now, I got my science education in the Navy, nuclear power school. So physics, chemistry, electromagnetics, good background. But I could directly correlate my mystical experience with what I'm learning in science. I said, I gotta start researching this out. And I can't just take what everybody's telling me. So that's when I started doing the research. And it opened up. The first book was written, took me 25 years to write it because of the amount of research I had to do. I didn't want the book to be just a bunch of opinions. I wanted to be able to correlate it to something that said, yeah, I can directly relate this experience to this knowledge, and here are the references. So it's not a novel, it's basically a textbook. It has an index and completely cross-referenced.
Okay, well, can you give me an example of, correlating the science and the religion? What's a point that, maybe I could relate to?
When I researched, I discovered that the word God was generic. It basically pertains to the forces that govern creation. So those forces were personified by the ancient world into characters. Well, the characters aren't what's real, any more than Mother Nature or Uncle Sam is real. It's what they represent. That's where the world has lost sight of. They said, oh, we believe in God. They can't tell you anything about it. So when I was directly be able to relate my concept of God to quantum physics, which means the powers that govern creation are at the fundamental level, that's what's running the show.
Right.
Now, another example. When I read the story of Adam and Eve, I said snakes don't talk, and fruit doesn't endow you with knowledge when you eat it. So this can't be a literal story. But at the same token, it has meaning, if you can understand what the meaning is. So that's what I searched for. I asked, why did the devil take the form of a serpent? They said, well, the serpent is the symbol for the devil. I said, if that's true, why would God turn Moses' staff into a symbol representing the devil at the burning bush at Mount Horeb and again in Pharaoh's court?
Right.
So they said, well, that's an interesting question. So what I did is I looked at what did the serpent mean to the ancient people, and I didn't just go into Christian doctrine. I went to Eastern philosophy and other religions and found that the serpent actually represented deity. And the reason the devil takes the form of a serpent in the Garden of Eden is because he was masquerading as a god.
Okay.
So these are the ways that I started seeing things. I said, okay, this story has meaning, but you can't take it literal, otherwise you lose the meaning.
Right.
So those are the ways I went about trying to compare things.
Well, I can see a point about that in ancient times, before the scientific knowledge that we have today. It was hard to explain things. The Great Flood. Now, they've proved that the Great Flood actually did happen. Now, whether or not Noah built an ark and saved all the animals and stuff, that's up for interpretation. But at that time there was. And then even the parting of the Red Sea, I remember reading an article one time about they had figured out at that time, because of the tides, the moon, the stars, the shifting, whatever, that the Red Sea actually went down to a level of about 2 feet, which people could have crossed over the Red Sea.
They could have, but it didn't have two walls on each side.
No, and it wasn't.
The Ten
Yeah,
Commandments.
right. Yeah, and it was not dry sand that they just,
Right.
walked across. So I can see a lot of interpretation
Yes.
of
yes.
natural forces being turned into a religious concept.
Yeah.
Now, as you say, merging the two worlds, where does spirituality come into this?
Spirituality is what gave the mystics their insights, which is the same thing that gave me my insights. And that's where the words came from. Spirituality is a higher level of awareness. And when Jesus talked about being born again, that's what he's referring to, awakening into a higher consciousness.
Okay.
So it's not just, oh, well, I believe. It's now you know why you believe.
Right.
So my awakening at age 9, which I could correlate to quantum physics, was an awakening. And that's where most of our religious teachings came from, is that the mystics of the ancient world had these awakenings. So when they talk about things, that's what they're basing it on.
Okay.
Now, we have different levels of teaching. So we are the parishioners, then you got the priests, and then you got the bishops, and then you got the cardinals, and then you got the pope. Each one is at a different level of knowledge. So in order to be a cardinal, you've got to do a lot of studies. So I did a lot of studies to get to where I am now, and that's what I had to correlate all this stuff to.
Right. Right.
So a lot of what I learned in the Bible, I could make sense out of it when I read Eastern philosophy. Because now it's starting to say, okay, this is where this came from.
Okay.
Cain and Abel, firstborn. Cain was the rough one. Abel was the fair-skinned one. When I'm learning about Eastern philosophy, it talks about two natures of man. You've got the beast within, which is we are evolved from an animal. But we also have this divine aspect, which what we can do when we properly apply ourselves is amazing. And that's where the firstborn versus the secondborn comes into the picture.
Okay.
But at the same token, Cain was despised of his brother because he was getting all the credit. So he kills him off. Of course, that didn't help him out.
No.
He led him into a curse.
Right.
Abel is later replaced by Seth. Seth becomes the replacement of Abel. And if you follow the storyline, Seth takes the lead and Cain falls out of the picture. Now you go back to Ishmael and Isaac. It's the same story. Two different people. Ishmael was the firstborn. It says he shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. Isaac was the one of promise. And as the story goes, Ishmael fades out of the picture, and Isaac takes the lead. So it keeps going that way. Isaac had sons. There was Esau and Jacob. Same thing. Esau is the rough one. Jacob was the fair-skinned one. And Jacob gets the promise. And then the Messiah would come through Jacob's line. So these stories are all painting the picture of what's going to follow.
Right.
The animal nature has to be subdued if we're ever going to amount to anything.
Right.
And the divine nature needs to be developed, and this is the born-again experience, if we're ever going to bring to light all of these things that were possible.
Right.
And I find that many of the stories are the same way. We get the story of Jesus. You have John the Baptist. He was firstborn. Jesus is the one that takes the lead. The pattern keeps repeating itself. And it's understanding what the pattern means that we're able to make sense out of it, take it to the next level.
Right.
Now, Jesus always talked in parables, which means that you can't understand what he's saying if you're not spiritually attuned.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of these spiritual experiences come in. And if you don't try to develop that spiritual nature, a lot of the stuff you're reading, you'll never make sense out of it. So a lot of people criticize the Bible. Oh, well, that couldn't have happened. Well, not literally. But what does it mean?
And did you find a lot of parallels in the Bible to your scientific research?
Let me give you one. Moses goes into Pharaoh's court. He throws down his staff. It turns into a serpent. Pharaoh's magicians all go into the court. They throw down their staffs. They all turn into serpents. Again, we go back to what did the serpent represent? Represented deity. Moses' serpent represented the monotheistic God. Pharaoh's serpents represented the polytheistic cultures, all the forces of nature seen as separate. When I was in nuclear power school, they said, unified field theory of physics. All of the forces of nature emanate from a singularity. And I says, that's what that's portraying, written over 3,000 years ago, but in a mythological framework.
Right.
Well, if you don't know that, you say, well, did a snake actually turn into a snake? It's all symbolic, direct correlation. So I said, they knew more than we think they knew.
Right.
But they had a different way of saying it because they all thought out of the associative side of the mind. So everything they wrote about was symbols. You don't understand the meaning of the symbols, it'll go right past you.
Right. Right. Well, I do believe that there's a singularity, a force that combines everything.
Yeah.
That works with everything. As you know, you've talked to Larry Zuccaro a few times.
Yes.
And his theories about DNA, and really that DNA is God. I'm not sure. Still mulling a lot of that over in my head too.
Sure.
But I do believe that there's a force that we haven't tapped into yet or don't understand that binds everything in the world. And I believe there's a balance.
And I believe that's what religion was trying to make us aware of.
Right.
Because if you can't tap into that, you're never going to be able to reap its benefits.
Yep. And I believe religion a lot of times too, as you pointed out earlier. There's two sides to everybody. Everybody's got a bad side, and everybody's got a good side. Obviously, you want to bring out the good side in people.
Yeah.
And so religion does try to teach people to,
Right
use their
from
good
wrong.
sides, right from wrong, how to help instead of destroy,
Right.
how to build instead of destroy, how to help instead of hurt.
Yes.
And I believe that is a strong message for most people. I, like you, was raised in the Catholic Church, but at some point, too, I got sort of disillusioned a little bit with, unfortunately, like everything else, I mean, anything that's made by man, created by man, run by man, it's going to have some of the
Flaws.
bad parts. It's going to have flaws in it.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to accept some of the premises they had, like you say. If you don't do right, you're going to go to hell. If you don't I believe that there is a piece of everybody. I'm just curious, but have you thought about the afterlife?
I have
with
quite
your
a
theories?
bit.
And what's your take on that?
Well, I came to realize, again, through spiritual experience, heaven and hell are not locations. On the earth plane, because there are other dimensions, they're the two extremes of the human condition. So if you want to know where hell is, just go to Gaza.
Right.
It's a hellish condition. You want to know what heaven is, look at some of the extraordinary things that people are doing today.
Yeah.
It's about what do you make of your life? I don't believe they're places, but I do believe that their conditions, good or bad, exist in multiple dimensions. I have read numerous books on near-death experience, and they said once you cross over, what you experience blows this world away. I have a friend who had a near-death experience. He said, I heard music. I have never heard that music anywhere on this planet. He has tried to find it. And the closest that he can get to it is some of these orchestras who, when everybody's in tune and there's a meaning behind it, it was like that. But he says, even that doesn't come close. He said, this was extraordinary.
Right.
Colors are more vivid.
So, this is something I ponder often. Do you believe that our consciousness, our spirit, the essence of who we are, continues after death?
I do.
Okay.
I read a book about Edgar Cayce. He was called the Sleeping Prophet. He used to go into trance, and he would enter what he called the Hall of Records. Now he says these records are of every person that ever lived, everything they ever did, with the intentions of why they did it. And he says, this is the memory of the universe. Nobody is forgotten. They're all there. And then he would be given by the keeper of the records that file which was important to help him help the individual he was dealing with. So he said, okay, here, this is yours. It's like going to the Vatican now.
Right.
They won't let you just go through.
Right.
They'll say, okay, over here you can look at that record.
Right.
He experienced the same thing, but in the spiritual realm.
Right.
Same thing. All the records are there. Nobody is forgotten. Now, do we go on? I don't believe my body is going to come back. I do believe that my consciousness moves on. I may have lived before. I don't remember. Although I don't by the same token, I don't remember a lot of things that happened when I was just a toddler.
Right.
So I'm losing memories of who I was while I'm still living this life.
Right.
So did we live before? Well, they say, well, why don't anybody remember? Some do. My brother-in-law, when he first started to talk, started talking about what happened to him when he was in the war. He's 3 years old. At that age, their family didn't have a TV. Nobody in their family had been in the military. So where is this information coming from? And by the time he was about 5, all those memories faded. But when he first started to talk, he remembered being in the war.
Right.
Well, where is he getting it?
You know, that is kind of an interesting point, because when you think about nature, you know, baby sea turtles, when they're born in the sand, 50 yards from the water, know exactly what they have to do.
Yes.
Instinctively.
Yeah.
No mother around, nobody to show them, nobody to teach them.
It's programmed into them.
It's programmed into them. Now, but is that instinctual knowledge was actually passed down to them?
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
And it's all through nature.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, even plants, flowers, they know what to do. They know how to survive. They know how to keep going. They know how to thrive. And that's the force that's always fascinated me. You know, it's not just people, you know, it's everything. Everything works in unison.
It does.
Everything works together. So now, before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about your second book.
Yeah.
Now, what was your second book? How did that carry on from your first book?
The first book was sort of like an overview of everything. How does the universe work? Where we fit into it? Why are things the way they are? The second book was more in terms of the specific teachings of Jesus Christ. What did he mean when he said some of the things he said?
Okay.
So that's what I wanted to get into on that one.
Right.
He talked about put your treasures in heaven. And they said, well, if heaven is up there, how can you put your treasures there? So I had to understand, what did he mean? And my dad was telling me one day to develop my talents and my skills, because he says nobody can take them from you, but your possessions, they can. So I realized when they're talking about treasures in heaven, right here, the higher mind,
Right.
where Jesus said no one can steal.
Right.
He said they can't take your skills and your talents, but they can steal your possessions. And that's okay, that's what Jesus meant. When we go to school, we're putting our treasures in heaven. When we learn a skill, we're putting our treasures in heaven. And that's what's going to help you get through life. The employer isn't going to hire you because of how many tools you have. He's going to hire you by how well you can use them.
Right.
Because tools can be replaced.
Yep.
But your skills, if they're not there, I don't care how many tools you have, you're not going to be able to do the job.
Right.
Put your treasures in heaven.
Right.
Develop your skills.
Well, actually, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
You know, the more you know,
Yeah.
The more you learn, the more you can experience.
So
Maybe in your next life, it'll pass you on to another plane or another
Now, you had mentioned about insights. Or instincts rather. I am reading a book on evolution of life. And what I'm amazed about is how the author says life seems to adapt to any change that comes, almost as if it's programmed to. Now, if changes has to do with DNA changes, how does DNA know how to change so that your offspring is going to be able to do what you were trying to do? So I said, I don't think the cells are deaf, dumb, and blind. They're not operating at the same level of consciousness we are. But I do believe that everything in life has its own consciousness.
Well, yeah, every aspect, everything has aspects of DNA in it. I mean, in the building blocks of our existence.
But how do the cells know how to change that DNA so that your offspring will be able to do what you were trying to do?
Right.
And it seems like it's a natural tendency that, okay, this dinosaur adapted to this situation as if it was programmed to, or it just automatically falls in.
Well, what it kind of brings me to a point that I've always kind of pondered is the human existence, the human intelligence, obviously we're sentient life like everything else on the planet, trees and bushes and, animals, insects, reptiles, whatever. We're all in that same, to me, life category. But there is a higher consciousness in human beings. What has triggered that, and what, and that's, I guess, one of those things you have to really kind of ponder on and come up with your own thing. You're not anti-religion by any means.
Not at all.
Good.
But
I feel.
But what I do say is that there's a lot of things that religion has to revisit.
Right.
Because they're teaching people, like, is the earth 6,000 years old? Bible says so. No, it doesn't.
Right.
People say it does. God created the earth in 6 days. So I looked up the word day. It has 3 definitions. The first definition is the time that the sun is above the horizon, to denote the difference between day and night. The second definition was the time it takes the earth to make one complete revolution. So at midnight, the next day kicks in.
Right.
And the third definition was an era or age. And I says, that has no time definition to it.
Right.
So how long were the days? How long did it take God to do that?
Well, you know what, Roy, that's a great point, and I'm hoping that people will, read your books, do their own thinking. Hope they'll try to find some sort of spirituality of their own. But I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. We're running out of time, but let me know how the things are going, and when you come up with the next one, I definitely want to read it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Roy. Have a great day. And that's it for Books and Beyond. We'll see you next time.
So it's a half.